Welcome to the 41st edition of airhacks TV. So it's not 42nd, so not all questions are going to be answered, but just some. And start with the whatever free show. So there will be no whatever today again. And good news first. And why good news? There will be all the workshops. There are already sufficient attendees for all the slots, so everything will take place. And actually, we are trying to upgrade the rooms because they are already too small. So if you like, attend in Munich. And of course, the web standard is getting to be more and more interesting. I'm constantly reworking the agenda. Okay. Now, the very first question, so this is the agenda for today. The very first question, come back to the gist, and this is from Monsieur Rinkevich, and I will just delete that and open this. Oh, what's wrong with that? GitHub guests. So I lost my questions. And I would like to have the detailed questions. Okay, Monsieur Rinkevich asked me whether I prefer React over Angular, and this is correct because Angular is a great framework, but it solves a lot of problems which I don't have. For instance, dependency injection is nice to have in the UI, but what you have to do with Angular, you have to declare it a lot. So it is actually, it even requires a command line interface to be somehow productive. And React is a minimalistic framework, I would say. So there is no dependency injection, it's just a view. And right now I'm supporting some startups, and they really like the decision of using React. So in one startup, we're using React for 2 years. And they are coming back and saying thank you for the decision. And actually, they started some project with Angular and they moved everything to React over, and they're really happy. And but the reasoning is not right. I don't like React because it supports more standards than Angular. I like React more because there is no dependency injection, no modules, it's just UI. So, having that said, I completed some HTML5 projects, and what I did in the project, I just used vanilla JavaScript, CSS, and HTML5, and looked surprisingly well. It worked surprisingly well, and it looked almost like React. So in upcoming projects, I'm using more and more web standards. So why I'm about the web standards is actually the same reason why I'm using Java EE. Java EE is compatible forever, so there were no breaking changes so far for, I don't know, 20 years, not 20, not 17 years. And the same is going to be true for web standards. So instead of chasing a framework, you can focus on standards. So there's actually exactly the same motivation why I like and really use like to use Java EE. Okay, thank you. But I delivered a talk in DevOps Poland, and I actually forgot what I really mentioned there, so this is a talk. If you would like to see what happened at the talk, I think it was built to last on the minute 30. So I mentioned both framework, and there is Vue.js. There are several frameworks which are very similar to React. So Meg Pringle asked me, okay, I'm one of the members of JSR 375, yes, one of the laziest member of 375. So I was active 1 year ago, and now really no time, which I really regret. So if you have any mean to stretch time, I would really interested. There's a framework which is stretching time. This would be great. And he asked me, does this API help protecting the REST endpoints of Java EE applications? Absolutely. Because the REST endpoints are, security of REST endpoints is related to servlets, and servlets are related to JSR 375. So it absolutely also helps to secure REST endpoints, or it makes it more flexible. So next one, let's see what happens in chat. So nothing new here. We see Pavel Scheidel is tuned in, and some people complaining about Flash. I actually don't have Flash, and it works. Probably there is some fallback in HTML5 streaming, so I don't think Flash is really required to watch airhacks TV. And if it really is, I upload it afterwards to YouTube, and there should be no Flash required. Okay, cool. Reactive programming. So there are lots of frameworks. So Mehmet Demsoy says the following. There are many frameworks like Completable Future, Airhacks Java, Reactive Streams, Akka, Vertex, React.js. And he's confused as everyone else, of course, because reactive programming is all over the place in all conferences. Everyone is excited about. And of course, it brings some benefits. But if you don't have the problem, you know, don't use it. So and the next question is, what's the problem? What is it exactly? And he comes a little bit closer and says, okay, Airhacks Java against Completable Future, and they are pretty close. So how to explain, you know, in the shortest possible way, reactive programming? I think what is really meant in Airhacks Java and Airhacks JS and all the frameworks is you have observable, which listens to something and continuously gives you data back. And actually, we had something like this in Java, and this was called, I think, stacks parser. So there was a, at the beginning, let's see whether this is docs from Oracle. So we have DOM parser, which, you know, in XML loaded everything to a DOM, and there was a JAX parser which read everything and sent events, and which was very efficient but really hard to code. And the stacks is not as fast as JAX, and but is more efficient than DOM, and this is really easy to use. And what it does, let's see whether we'll find an example. Oh, no example. It was, you could just iterate over, yeah, and give me just a very example code here. So stream reader, and you had this stream reader and you iterated over the reader, did something with it. And reactive programming would be a little bit more, so there will be no while. You could just subscribe, you could filter and do something with it without iterating, but this is very close to this. And we have something similar in Java, it's also called future. The only problem, if you get the future back, you have to resubscribe again. And the observable in Airhacks Java and the others, you can reuse it over and over again without resubscribing. What we also get in Java 9 Flow API, we get the Flow interface in JDK 1.9. And this Flow interface is absolutely compatible with reactive extensions or reactive programming. So what we get in Java 9, we get actually reactive programming built in. So you can use the other frameworks, but you don't have to. So if you can use standards, use the standards. So so you could, for instance, I'm using Completable Future. It's not, you know, entire reactive programming, but is good enough in my projects. And I never missed a feature of reactive observable feature in reactive programming. So why I would use, when I would miss the feature, just imagine you had event source like, you know, a robot's emitting data or a drone emitting data or stock market emitting data, and you would be interested just in specific cases. So then with reactive programming, you can just subscribe to the socket or something else. I didn't didn't use the word whatever. So something, and then you could use filters or what you get from the Java 8 streams and react to it. So this is the main difference. So we have this, and what I did 4 years ago, I recorded a small reactive programming with JavaFX session. It is fairly short. You can just watch it. And I use JavaFX to explain reactive programming, and I use data binding for this. So I think I subscribe to 2 fields, and if something changes in the fields, a button gets enabled or disabled. So you could use, for instance, reactive programming for input validation. So if you like, watch that reactive program with JavaFX, a short video, an old one. And I also implemented a library, Java 8 data transformer. And what it does, it reads the data from JDBC, JSON, or any source you like, and transforms the data to another representation. So I could also use here reactive programming, and just for fun, I will probably re-implement that in Java 9. Why not? Java 9 with the Flow API. Okay, so we have that, and there is ErixJava. This is the Reactive X ErixJava library, and you can look actually what they are doing. The string observable, and at the very end, just review the source code. You will find here what they are doing. They are reading using just byte buffer, and if they find something, so if they forward the data on next, and this on next is the official interface, I think, from subscription. This is the name of the thing, from subscription. And we get in Java 9 the official API. So ErixJava could be another implementation of the interfaces. I think we covered now fairly deep reactive extension ErixJava. But briefly, what it means, we have observer, we can subscribe for events and react to the data with modern means like lambdas expressions. Then we are reactive, we are reacting to the stream of data, and we don't have to resubscribe again. So this is reactive programming. So is it no revolutionary? In my projects, probably not. I'm still deleting or fighting with DTOs, DAOs, and superfluous factories and superfluous impulse. So if I will delete this CRUD, so it means this bloat, then probably we could use something like this. But I'm waiting for this for years already. So anhydrator mentioned. I think we covered this. Now, Monsieur de Ratzmann says he's using startup singleton, and this in a long-running process from startup singleton, and he invokes asynchronous EGB. And he asked me what went wrong. So what could happen? So I'm not sure. So the first startup singleton means it is invoked first, even before all other beans are available. So what could happen, the startup singleton starts and the asynchronous EGB is not available. So it will wait until it's available. So this was the first suspicion. The next one could be you are for any reason not using the injected instance. You are just using this method. And even if this method is annotated with at asynchronous, it's still synchronous call. So to really use at asynchronous features, you will have to use the injected instance. And by the way, if you would like to have more control, just use the managed executor service. Okay, just a brief. Oh, now I have von Nagara Jack. What is JSF future? This is a good question. So I think I would say the future is bright from the technical perspective. The problem is the perception is somehow JSF is bloated, complicated, and therefore it could die, although it is a good framework. This is like, I think Betamax died, and what is the standard? VHS 1, also Betamax was better. So this is how it works. If you know what happens behind the scenes, I think JSF is great and actually very, very productive. So the majority of the startups I work with, they're using primefaces for back office admin interfaces because it's crazy fast. And if they need something more evolved, complicated, pixel perfect, they switch to HTML5, React, or frameworks like that. Okay, so I think the future is actually bright. The problem is now, what is the marketing story behind JSF? So if you would know, every one of you will write a post how great JSF is, and it will take momentum, will just gain some momentum. It will survive. If everyone will ditch on JSF, probably the developers behind JSF will lose their interests. Okay, cool. Is it possible to use persistence context in an interceptor? Absolutely. So the persistence context, so if you have an interceptor and you are intercepting a stateless EJB, then the interceptor becomes the EJB. So you can do, now I will use on purpose, whatever you are doing in a stateless, you can also do in interceptor. And I don't think Para seems to have a problem with that. Because I don't think so, because I did it already. And Entity Manager is a little bit strange, because the Entity Manager, I mean, what I would do is, let's say, a boundary is intercepted, and you would like to log something to a database, for instance. Instead of injecting the Entity Manager to an interceptor, I would rather use a control which, for instance, uses the Entity Manager, so you can encapsulate all the behavior in a regular POJO and not implementing this in the interceptor. Okay, so therefore, I don't think I actually implemented something with Entity Managers in interceptors, but it has to work actually. What I did a lot, I fired events in interceptors, I injected stuff, checked security, and this works very well. Whether I have experience with AMQP, so AMQP is a standard protocol, currently in the version 1.0, and this RabbitMQ is using 0.9.1, I think, is the current supported protocol for transferring data asynchronously. Yes, it works well, and it is useful for sending messages of datasets between microservices in a scalable and reliable way. Of course, as any other messaging service, not like, MQP is great and JMS wouldn't work. So JMS is also great for that. But in microservices, in scalable and reliable way, if I think of microservice, the first thing which comes to mind is why not WebSockets, for instance. So, and WebSockets is not reliable, of course. It is reliable, but it's not transactional. So the question is, do you need persistent queues or durable subscribers? Then it is that then WebSockets are not suitable for that. But if you just know streaming data, WebSockets are just perfect. My second choice would be, if you really need a little bit transactions or more reliable behavior, something like Infinispan or Hazelcast is already. So Hazelcast comes with Payara and Infinispan with Whitefly. And the Apache one, I actually forgot. There's also something similar in Apache Grid caching framework. And what you could do, or what you can do is, for instance, Hazelcast and Infinispan not only have like a hash map, you can also send events, and they can be transactional in Hazelcast, even with two-phase commit. And this is what would be interesting to do is, like, you could use write to one node, and the data is going to be replicated to all other microservices, and you could even subscribe as a listener. So this will be the communication protocol. And AMQP, for instance, there is implementation for Erlang and other languages. So it would be more the choice if you will have to write from Java to communicate with Erlang. But you could do the same with WebSockets. So first, I will stay away from any third-party libraries, as always. Use the platform, whatever is there. But I wouldn't use JMS in microservice environment with Java EE, and the reason for that is because I also will have to set up the JMS server, which can be painful in cluster. But if the JMS server is already there, like MQ series, and is already maintained by another department, just go for it. Okay, so there's a tweet. So I just copied a tweet, and this is an actually somehow interesting article. To framework or not to framework. And yeah, what it basically says, start with nothing And if you you can learn a lot, and it explains a little bit, libraries versus frameworks, and it says, okay, if you're using frameworks, you have to understand them, are depending on that. I think if something like Java is a little bit different, because if you look at the business logic, you don't see the framework, so you are not really depending on the framework, you are depending on the framework features. And the question is it worth to implement the features? This is what is it worth to implement your own dependency injection? Actually, it's fairly easy. This is actually, there's even, I think, and I mean dependency injection. There's even a video which I implemented, even 4 years ago. So it is in 10 minutes, I implemented dependency injection with, or 8 minutes, with reflection. So should I do that for fun? I mean, why? You can do that, to show how it works, and then just rely on the framework. The next story is what I can also do very simply with Java. I can use dynamic proxy to implement my own AOP framework. So this would be the second thing. Actually, we do is in the Bootstrap course on Munich, so just to explain what the server actually does. And it is fun to do it once, but never again. I would never implement dynamic proxy to have fun with proxies. If I know that if I just put at stateless on my Pojo, the stateless will start transactions for me and check the security and threats. So implementing the low-level technical stuff, I find a little bit boring. So that's all. So we could do it, of course. And there is also a little bit a different story. So if I'm implementing something for myself, like for instance here the statistics or on my server, I actually do a lot from scratch just for fun. But if I do something for clients, I will never do this, because then I will have to document all my thoughts, and there's actually no way that a few years later someone will get why I implement my own dependency injection framework. So this is the thinking behind, and it also relies to JPA, whether JPA is worth, and this is actually the same. So if you with JPA you are incredibly fast at the beginning, but the more complex the query gets, the more you have to understand. In one point of time you can say, okay, now I cannot use JPA anymore for this particular cases. I will implement it from scratch, but it doesn't mean you have to ditch JPA altogether. You can use for the other 10% JDBC or any other low-level technology, and not JPA. So you're not forced to use JPA for everything. What I think, what is a good idea, first to understand your platform, and you can implement in your leisure stuff. And then if you get how it works, then just ditch your stuff and focus on business logic and use the framework. And he had also some good points. He said somewhere, he wrote somewhere that he saw that developers had to use a framework, and they implemented their own stuff on top of it. This is actually what I also see in Java EE projects, enterprise projects, because there is nothing else to do. So you can just fully focus on business logic. You don't have to implement anything. It's boring. So, and what the developers will do, they will invent some stuff. They say, oh, the dependency injection from application server is not fast enough, therefore I will implement my own. Or logging framework is not flexible enough, so therefore I will have to do something about this. Or, producers doesn't work properly, so I will have to implement my own factory using reflection. And of course, because I already have the factory, it would be nice to have a small configuration framework, so I can implement this. And this configuration framework has to have several levels. So the first level reads from properties, and they can override this with database stuff, and it should be also for staged environment. And and then the whole life, developer life, is more exciting. But this is not what the clients are paying us for. So imagine. Now, in real world, not in software world, but in real world, people like carpenters, butchers, or woodworkers would behave like we. So it's like, oh, to really, they will come to you to fix your home, and they say, I cannot use my electro drill because I don't know what's going on inside. The framework is way too complicated. I will build my tool first, come back, you will pay me for that, and then I'll use my own drill, and then I will really understand what's going on. And this is not how the world works. This is like, I don't know why the whole software development world is so crazy, and outside the world everyone seems to behave a little bit more seriously, I would say. Okay, let's see what happens. JSF future done. Twitter is quiet, which is good and bad because we have lots of stuff to cover. And the next one, is it possible to unit prime faces? So there was some discussion like, yeah, this was, I actually forgot it 20 days ago, was like, forget it. Is it possible to develop an independent prime faces based project and use backend Java later? I don't know. Yes, it is absolutely possible. You can use the Java E projects with boundaries and use prime faces later, and then you can inject the boundaries to prime face views. So it works absolutely. Is it possible to unit test prime faces? It is even possible to system test prime faces. I use it in the testing course once the attendees want to see it. So I use the Graphene framework to unit test or system test prime faces. And unit test prime faces, I guess the whole framework is unit tested prime faces. I know the developers, they are pretty reasonable, so everything is unit tested. System and integration tests and unit tests. I mean, prime faces, they come with JavaScript components. So you can, of course, unit test the JavaScript components. But this should be a little bit... So the all the JSF frameworks, so like prime faces, they have components usually written in JavaScript, and they can be even separated from the Java part. And the JavaScript part can be absolutely unit tested. And the backend stuff, it just emits the JavaScript stuff. This could be also unit tested, but is less important for real world projects. And what is actually important is how if you combine the built-in prime faces components to an app. So what is interesting is to unit test the application. This is what's interesting, and I don't call it system test because you are remote controlling the browser. And this is a really interesting use case for frameworks like Graphene, Archelion. So this is the Graphene framework. Okay, I hope covered. So we can close the anhydrator, back. So interesting question. So if one if one is purchasing the on-demand Java 7 workshops from airhacks.io, gets all workshops listed on the website or only one clicked? So this is what I don't fully understand the question. So there's airhacks.io. There are 4 workshops. So if you click here and, oh, stop it. If you click somewhere here and you purchase the workshop here, so what you actually purchased is just this workshop, Java 7 Bootstrap. So if you would like to have everything, you will spend, I think there are about 40 euros or $40, $160 for everything, or you can rent everything for $40. But if you buy one, you don't get the others. It's like books. Okay. I hope it's absolutely clear. Cool. So. And there is no information what the full series contains. So if you go to Java microservices, so this is the full series, what it contains. And there are all 55 episodes. So this is about, I think, 4 hours or something. There's effective Java E, I think, is the next one. Here. It's also everything. So it's the whole agenda. And Java E Bootstrap, I hope. So you should be able to find the whole series. By properly is misleading my entry page. So this is all what Java EE Bootstrap contains. I hope it's crystal clear. What I can do, I think the problem is, so that if you don't have account to the, if you click here somewhere, no, it's not true. You come here. I thought this what you want to see. So you will have to use. So just use the links here, here, and here, and you will see the contents. And if you look at GitHub, you will see even the sample apps. So you should be able to see the whole agenda. Okay. I want to use JAX-RS client using Jersey in a Java SE multi-threaded environment. How can I make the client instance thread safe so I can reuse it? Very good question, and it really depends whether you're using Jersey or Whitefly. And in Whitefly, for instance, there are like two modes, and the Whitefly REST Easy library, it depends on how it's called, HTTP components, HTTP common client from Apache. And yeah, what's the problem with that? In standard case, there's only one thread per client. So you can perfectly use it with an stateless EGB because there will be only one thread per stateless EGB. But if you try to share the client, it will stuck. So this is one of the common Whitefly problems. And this does not happen with Jersey, for instance. What I would do is I use a control like at stateless and then use the client, fetch the target in post construct, and you can close in predestroy. Also, I have to say, I never closed the client in Jersey and it passed all the tests. But still, you know, if I would, I should start closing the client. And how can I make the clients thread safe that I can reuse it? Yeah, exactly. So private client, private web target, wrap it in a stateless EGB. Then it's perfectly thread safe because EGBs are thread safe. And if you get 5 EGBs, you get, if you have five parallel threads, you get 5 EGB instances and you get 5 Jersey instances. Any workshop streaming update? Yes, this HTML5, how to call it, like the real name of the course would be like vanilla HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript apps. Now it's called Web Standards. Is there an update? Yes, I'm putting more and more standards in it, and I'm 30% done. So I'm constantly reworking the course because I get more and more ideas from my projects. So, and there is no standard way to implement attachments. I think attachments like file upload, you will have to use Jersey or REST Easy extensions right now. So next one is differences between Java EE and C#.NET. What is the difference? C# and .NET is a less of a framework like Java EE is. This does not start. So I would say the how it's called, the Microsoft server is the Microsoft HTTP server. I forgot the name. Microsoft Information Server. This is, I think, the name, Information Server. This is more like the application server from Java EE. So you will have to have .NET plus Microsoft Information Server, and then you have something like Java EE. And there is Windows Communication Framework, Communication Foundation, not framework. And this is even closer to Java EE. And so there are services with simplified configuration. Looks like this. And then, okay, this is not what I wanted to show you, the bindings endpoints, but this Windows Communication Foundation with Microsoft Information Server and .NET, they are somehow similar to Java EE. Okay. If you change from one platform to another, how much of your knowledge will transfer? I would say a lot, because if you understand the request response And the service concept, it applies to everything, even Ruby on Rails. Would the change be something like Java 8 to Node.js or something like Java 8 to Spring? I would say more Java 8 to Node.js, because Java 8 and Spring are fairly similar. And Node.js is also similar to, let's say, servlets, but of course, it's different language. I would say more Java 8 to Node.js. Dynamic entity and EclipseLink. So, of course, works is proprietary, so no one knows how long it is supported. Any update in Payara could break this because this EclipseLink feature. And large amount of data could work. The problem with all the dynamic data is, like, imagine like a hash map. So one entity is a hash map with key and value, so you get a far more instances than one class. And this was a problem in my projects. We used instead of, back then we had to use data transfer objects, but we used a dynamic data transfer objects, like how it's called, bin utils, Jakarta Commons bin utils, and also build my own. And the problem with that is, of course, that you have many more instances. And actually described it also in the green book. And I hope I also compared the performance. So the performance is worse with that. So to encrypt the data, I always use database. So database is great for encrypting the data. I would never do this by myself. And the offline feature can be done right, is never-ending story. So I think to be offline capable is always, the question: what happens on collision, and who wins if something goes wrong, and yeah. So what we did even one time, so you can just experiment with that. If you're using Entity Manager, the Entity Manager knows which entities are dirty, which entities are changed or empty, and there's even a feature called cache coordination in EclipseLink. So what the Entity Manager is able to do in EclipseLink, send the changes as events over the wire, RMI, Corba, JMS, with pluggable protocols. So what you could do is, of course, you can hack EclipseLink in that way that the cache is replicated across the nodes. But still, what happens if the same entity is changed twice, or the entity with the same ID is changed at the same time in two nodes? So we need answer for that. Whether I can share a completed project in GitHub like Aaron's Gupta, Miles to Run, or Cargo Tracker. Actually, X-Ray, this is what is also content of the Blue Book. It is even on GitHub. So I thought, so the X-Ray is my complete project, and what this is an old one. Is I think even older than from Arun's or Cargo from Riza. And what it is this is my real world project. This is actually all the stats. This is the stats here, these stats here. This is my real world projects. What I cannot do, I cannot share project what I do for my clients. And in the real world night hacks, this is, where is the book? Forgot what real world night hacks. So in this book, I implemented the X-Ray application and described what was the thinking process, the idea behind. So this is what I did. Okay, so this is done. Which conferences do you advise to see the trends of software industry and get the best benefit? And this is what, so first, no fluster stuff is not necessarily trends. So trends is for me like, esoteric stuff and Gartner quadrant or whatever. Sorry for the whatever, or how it's called, the radar, technology radar. And no fluster stuff was more like hands-on conferences. And I attended the InfoShare conference in Gdańsk in Poland, and this was amazing. This was like there were Google people, Amazon speakers from all over the world, GitHub, a huge conference. And there's also a startup area where I delivered a talk, of course, about Java EE. which people were confused at the beginning, but then there was no questions left, so I think it was well received. And this info share, I think it's a good one. There's even some free sessions, and you can just upgrade the ticket with and attend the workshops. The DevOps, of course, this is also always a good content. What should be careful, what I don't like, if you get the same talks and all conferences over and over again, is because this is more like a show. Someone prepares a talk and delivers it 10 times a year. The question is always, is what they are doing between the talks. Are they just preparing the talks, or they are spending time in projects? This is what interests me the most. So if you, after the talk, go to the speaker and say, no, where you used the technology you introduced to us, and if you get reasonable answers, or you can then ask about the experience, then you will exactly know whether this is something cool new stuff which is never used, or something with some meat. So yeah, DevOps, Vox conferences, Java user groups, of course, and this InfoShare. And in Germany, we have JAX and the WJAX. These are huge conferences. Yeah, this is that. Okay, let's see what happens here. No questions here. No questions. No questions. No questions. Next one. Which would be your approach to implement, I think it is server-side rendering on a custom service page app, ES6 in Java ecosystem. So server-side rendering. So, and I want to avoid JSP. And the question is why? Because I really like JSP. But if you would like to avoid JSP, you have your reasons. And reasons could be you don't like the templating. So what I did. Java NAS, let's see, I forgot the name of the project. Nashorn template engine. And the project is SPG, stands for Static Page Generator. And this doesn't run on a server. What it does is you have a template, and the template uses Mustache. This is Mustache.js. This is a nice templating language, and this is Mustache and Handlebars. So there are different templating engines. And my thinking was I would like to use, the same templating language which all designers are using. And yeah, Mustache or Handlebars, is this what you usually would expect? So let's see if you go to it, JavaScript and search. Yeah, you will have to do this. But it looks like this. Where is the template? Yeah, the template looks like that. And this is the key, and the key is here. This is the key, and this is the value. So this is going to be replaced by look. And if you go to the workshops, and for instance, the web standard, actually the whole page is generated with the SPG. And why I did this? Because, for instance, this here corresponds with the hidden fields behind the registration with the same date. And this is stored in a JSON, and I generate the static page whenever I get a new course date. By the way, I forgot to mention the Bootstrap, Effective, and Architecture. The next course is going to be to take part in March. I had no time to announce that, but yeah, it will be in March. So you could do the same in real in live, so on the server. So you can read JSON from database or on REST endpoint, store the template somewhere, combine both to an HTML template. And we did it a lot for invoice generation, contracts and printing. So it works. So I would use Nashorn. You can just take a look at SPG. Nashorn, Java 8, and a control, a CDI or an EGB, and it should work. Nice. Covered. A very good question. So I would like to know your naming your boundary class, which just consists of create, read, delete, update, CRUD action. So if I really would have something like this and it just has the CRUD, why not to call it customer CRUD? So instead of calling it customer service, just call it customer CRUD. And if it gets more responsibility, then rename it to whatever it's doing. Also nice one. Niksha says there is a JAP for Java 9, and this JAP defines Java 9 util Java logging API. And what's my thought about this? And yeah, as I've shared the opinion with Niksha, Java util logger is more than enough for my projects. Is I don't have the problem that the Java the logging frameworks don't have enough features. The more is like the developers are writing lots of crap to the log files, and no one is able to derive a sensible information from that. But this is interesting. So this new Java logging will not replace the old Java logging. It's more like they will separate the implementation from the interface, and they will use it all internally also for like I even guess I suspect even the garbage collector, the internal JVM machinery will use this logging interface. And if it come out and is good enough, I will for sure use it. So before I use any third-party library, I will always prefer Java 9. The leaner the better. Thin wars. Okay, hopefully. Let's see what happens here. No questions. No questions. No questions. So quiet audience. I'm from Munich, so I'm not far away. So thank you for asking. So how to discover RESTful web services or developing generic RESTful web service client. You can absolutely do this. What I'm asking myself, so if you auto-discover all the links and you will, for instance, see that airhacks/workshops, so you'll find only workshops and you will find out that you can, follow the link. But what you will have to do is you will have to configure your generic client how to react to the workshop. So you will have to configure the client then to say, okay, follow the link, and if you fetch the effective workshop, register to it. So I think as a human, we go to a page, we click on the link, and then we think about what to do next. If you build a generic client, the question is what should happen to the generic client? You will just follow all the links and just discover all the possibilities. So you're building a crawler, like a Google crawler or robot, or you would like to do something sensible. And if you would like to implement something sensible, you will have to configure what should happen if you follow this link. And the question is then, when you are able to follow the link generically, but you will have to configure what happens in XML, JSON, YAML, what is the added value? And the repeatable process, what you could do, the question is, would you like to do it from outside or inside your app? If you're building this from inside, you could use the Sebastian Daschner's great, how it's called? JAX-RS Analyzer plugin, it analyzes all the structures for you. It walks the structures and extracts even the information. So you could use Jenkins for that, for instance. So take a look at this. And you could, of course, do it from the JAX-RS client as well, because you can fetch the data structure, parse the data structure, and see whether there are links, and follow the links. So you will only have to know where is the link, and if in case the JAX-RS service is done right, so it should be obvious what it is. It will be possibly behind an element called links. If you are following, for instance, Atom publishing protocol suggestions, then it should be easy to follow. I want to learn React.js Polymer with Java backend. So first, if you are using React.js or Polymer, I'm using Polymer 2, but I'm not using the Polymer 2 components. So I'm just using the Polymer 2 just for templating, but I'm not using the paper button on paper text field. I'm using this straight HTML5 elements. And and Java EE backend doesn't matter. So what in both cases, I will use the fetch HTTP API and with a polyfill when required. And then the Java EE is already separated. And then for React, I mean, it's trivial, just create some views. I would encapsulate the fetch API in a service pojo or in a plain old JavaScript object, a service pojo. And then you are good to go. And Polymer is exactly the same. So there's no difference. Performance about Streams API in Java 8. I mean, there's lots of talk about this, and the question is really relevant. I never had a problem in my project that streams are too slow, and we have to move to 4, and the for loop or while loop. So I don't think it's an issue in general case, and you will always find corner cases or how it's called. A load and stress test will show that the streaming is too slow and you have to use regular for or while loop. And whether I think that Oracle team will fix the gap of performance between streams and loops, I don't think there is something to fix. I mean, what you should do, give me an example where stream is too slow and for is faster. So like real world example, and you could look at this and think about this. What I know, the Oracle team is really concerned about performance and they are constantly improving the performance. Is that there's not like really bright people, old Sun engineers and Oracle engineers, and they are, it's not like, they are just ignoring any performance hints, and I'm not aware of any serious performance problems. Okay. HR Glassfish Payara, no Hazelcast. Session replication. Whether I have any suggestions. I assume the session ID is always refreshed and never shared. What can happen if you have, first, you should use this distributable in WebXML. This is the obvious part. But if you're writing something to a session, there is a difference whether you are working in replicated mode or standalone mode. In a standalone mode, the HTTP session behaves like a hash map. So if you have a key and value, and you change the value is changed. If you are in replicated mode, then if you change the value, the value is changed in one node, but not on the others. So in order to make the replication work, what you will have to do is to say HTTP session.put and override the existing value, and then it gets replicated. This is what usually works. What I'm actually doing, I'm disabling HTTP session replication because you only have, CAP theorem, and there have two choices. Either you will have to be scalable, so then it has to be replicated asynchronously. If it's replicated asynchronously, what's the point? Because if it fails, it is not replicated, so it's no failover. If it is replicated synchronously, it's just too slow. So if you get more nodes, it gets too slow. So this is why I try to avoid HTTP session and stateful EGB replication. Not I try to avoid, I actually for years I never replicate that. I'm really interested and excited about the concept of fetch-jar. You shouldn't be at all excited about fetch-jar. And even if there's a whitefly swarm is absolute production ready, but I don't know why you're excited in fetch-jar. You are building 90% of stuff which never changes, like the whitefly swarm changes every 3 months or twice a year, and you are building it over and over again, and you're putting all the stuff to a fetch-jar, and But what whitefly swarm is capable of, look up the hollow jar. This is the actual what you should be excited about. So you can build thin jars with whitefly swarm, and I will probably record a screencast or write a blog post about that. This is really nice. I don't get at all fetch jar concept. So what it means to me, I'm building, a big jar over and over again, 50 times a day, and upload it over and over to the server. And from the, let's say 20 megabyte of the jar, just 500K are different or changing at each build. So this is what I don't get. Okay, me again. So you often recommend Kubernetes. Really? I mentioned Kubernetes a lot, but not often. I mean, if someone asks me about that, then Kubernetes, okay. Is it possible to make a separate YouTube coding session? Auto-scaling services? Absolutely, it's possible. The problem is just my time. Before I do this, I would like to complete the HTML5 course. So this is why I'm a little bit quiet with my YouTube channel. And OpenShift is also a nice option because OpenShift already wraps the Kubernetes. So it uses Kubernetes behind the scenes. And if you would like to try that, look at Minishift. Okay. I got tweet today. Is there any way to set timeout in JAX-RS using only JE or something that works in Jersey and REST easy? This is what I proposed in the JAX-RS Java 8. I wrote several emails. I don't know whether it's actually inside. I wrote the email and the emails were migrated to GitHub. I don't know whether they were actually read, but I tried to enforce that. Hopefully it is. So, and this is twice. So I will have to delete this once. So let's see whether there are any other. I will just reload that. Oh, next one. How do you see Java-based frontend like JSP and JSF compared to JavaScript-based ones with Java backend? This is fairly simple. There's a server-side rendering or client-side rendering. If you have everything on the server, it is hard to be offline. So the Java backend and with single-page apps, it works like we have in the backend a nice API, domain-specific API, and the clients are just using the API, and they can be offline or not. It's more like fat client. If something works, if something runs on the server, like JSF, JSP, Vardin, for instance, or Vardin, then it's a little bit different because what happens then, you have direct access to the Java classes, and you have fine-grained interaction model. So you can call methods and you can validate on the server right away. And with the client-side frameworks, you will have to validate twice, once in the front end and then in the back end. So this is two completely different architectures. So this is the difference. Okay, nice. No question here. Yeah, Pavel also has a nice... there are lots of projects using JSF right now. Okay. He asked me, is there any good Maven recipe on packaging JE apps for different applications automatically using continuous delivery approach? I did something like this. This is what we do in the testing workshop, and with Jenkins 2 is actually trivial, because with Maven, how it's called? Adam Bean, Maven, Java EE. So the way to go is that this is the archetype. So you have already the war. And now if you, so what you have to do then is to, to submit the war to application server, or using FTP, or in Docker, you just create a Docker image. So this is what happens. And I use Jenkins file, which is included in the war. Is available to use JCA resources? Of course. I mean, and a good book, I'm not sure, but there is a connectors Adam Bean. So I created 2 connectors with source code, and this is in the green book. And just look at the source code, whether you like it or not. My perception is JCA is not that well known. So what can happen? You are using recent application server, and there are still some bugs because it's not that every project uses JCA. So this is the downside of JCA. Yeah, but absolutely, you can use it. this is what we actually covered. Whether I prefer React over AngularJS, I think everyone prefers React over AngularJS. If someone knows React, did build a project with React, and at the same time with AngularJS, I cannot imagine that people will still prefer AngularJS unless they are the J2E, not Java E. J2E architects from old days with 20 layers and XML files. They will probably like AngularJS a little bit more. X-Ray project is actually J6. Yes, it is J6, but there's no difference with Java 7. With Java 7, it would be even a little bit more efficient, but the sample project is still interesting. Oh, Brett Tucker, thank you, Brett. Welcome back, and come in December to Munich. So we have glowing wine waiting for you. Cool. So I think we covered everything. Thank you for watching. See you in Munich. Glowing wine in December. So we have Christmas market or winter market and Munich airport. Not related to airhacks, but we use it. And and still enjoy the summer and see almost in autumn. I think there's a beginning of September is the next 42nd airhacks episode, and of course it will answer all the questions. Thank you for watching, and bye.